Well, hi everybody, and welcome. If you're watching us in real time, happy Halloween. Here in the States, it's Lori's got her booish. Do that one more time, Lori.
Boo,
Woo!
boo.
I think you got a skeleton there in your corner there. Yeah, it's Halloween, and I was thinking about Halloween and I thought how fortuitous that we're doing this topic on Halloween, that we didn't really plan it that way. But when you think about Halloween, it's a time where we take this like really scary kinds of stuff and we make it fun. And I think that's what we're going to do today. What do you think?
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier. As we were putting out the information about this and marketing it. I was having so much fun with there's so many analogies around the fear of change and like what's behind those closed doors and all that, the murkiness of the unknown. And so it really struck me. I'm like, wow, there's like a lot of like fun analogies here. And so Halloween's a perfect day to be doing this, just coincidentally.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are watching live in LinkedIn or via YouTube, LinkedIn in particular, there is a comment section. So if you do have any comments or questions, please feel free to utilize that. Or if you're watching this in the replay, we'll give you some information. Let me just, I'm going to put up the websites and we'll introduce ourselves in just a moment as well, so that you can reach out to me or to Lori and get some help or get some questions answered. So let me start first off. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Barbara Fonte, and I am the founder and owner of Big Dream Executive Coaching. I'm a master coach and a certified positive intelligence mental fitness coach. And I help people level up their mindset and their motivation and their methods so that they can reach their full potential. And that often requires some change in the way we think and change in the way that we do things. And I'm so thankful and so happy to have Lori Hirsch Schultz here, because Lori is, oh my gosh, she's a dynamo when it comes to helping people navigate change and transformation. And Lori, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I think you do it best.
All right. Well, and I'm so happy to be here. I think I met Barbara through a networking organization. It shows the power of networking. And we have been having so much fun talking about this topic. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Yes. So I'm also a coach. I do what I call inflection point coaching, and I partner with people who are at inflection points. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but who are at inflection points and are ready to navigate through change, but they don't have necessarily the clarity or the confidence or even the courage. We're talking about things that are scary to do that navigation. So that's what I do. I mean, I partner with folks who are ready to make change. They see great opportunities in the future, but they're not quite sure how to grasp them or how to get there for a whole host of reasons. And it's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm thrilled to be here and excited to talk about change.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lori. Yeah, and so what we're hoping to do here is bring some value to everyone, give you a little bit of insight and some helpful hints and best practices for navigating change and making your next potential move. I thought a good place to start would be, and I know we both get a lot of questions about this, is how do you know, or what are the signals that say, maybe it's time to make a change, maybe it's time to do things differently? What do you think about those?
Yeah. I think we all frequently, all of us, reach what I call these inflection points. And sometimes, usually, we don't really pay a lot of attention to them. But there's an opportunity to pay attention to them and listen to them. So like some of the things that I think about inflection points, sometimes they feel really big. Sometimes it's things like, sometimes it's getting laid off, but it's not always that straightforward. It can also be just having a really terrible boss and realizing that this is just not the right place for you anymore and I need to leave. It can be if you own your own business or whatever it may be. It could be stress it's pulling you away from, it's maybe having health impacts, so those could be big things. But it can also be little things too. It can be just feeling bored, always feeling bored. That could be an inflection point. Or it can feel like you're not reaching your full potential. Like, wow, I mean, like I'm doing all this work and it's not really, I could do so much more. And feel like I'm being held back. It can feel like you're maybe not living your purpose. Like there's this little niggling thing in your back of your head that
Mhm.
your company or the culture of your company or your or even is not aligned with what's really super important to you. So those are some of the inflection points that I see that know that kind of indicate you're ready for a change. I'm wondering, what about you, Barbara? What are you seeing when clients come to you? What are some of the things, or what are you seeing that are indications of time for change?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say you brought up a really good point. Sometimes we're not the ones um, creating the change necessarily. They're sort of like, uh-oh, we're downsizing now, or uh-oh, the person we love doesn't want to be in a relationship with us or
Yeah.
something
Yep.
else, or a
Yep.
child leaves the house, something like that. Um, but then we have opportunities. What I see is very often people are in a situation where I think you alluded to this as well. They're not engaged, right? They're just sort of languishing there. You say to
Languishing. What a great word. I love that word. It's a great
yeah,
word.
just kind of they're not thriving, but they're also not suffering necessarily.
Right.
But they're not being all the best they can be. It's like when I always say to people, how's your day going? Even if I call someone on customer service, and so sometimes you'll hear, it's going, nah,
Or
oh,
okay, right?
right,
I
right.
hear, oh, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. But do we want to live in okay all the time?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is something else that you mentioned, which is regard to like, your purpose and your vision. When someone comes to me and something's not right, they don't really know, or sometimes we're just dealing with what is at the tip of the iceberg that we see. But when we sort of dig down a little bit, very often when people are unhappy where they are, let's just say, is to be general, it's because the values of whatever they're taking part in doesn't align with their personal values. And I know I've experienced that as well,
Yeah.
where I worked for an organization, was very successful. I was in kind of a sales coaching and managing role. We hit our numbers. We were very profitable. I loved my team. They were great. They were talented, and they were just really amazing people. But there was something amiss. I knew there was something, we sort of like don't pay attention to those signs until they get to a certain point where we go, you know what, this is not right, so I need to make a change. So
Yeah.
it's getting in touch with who you are and getting rooted in that. That kind of, I find that's a good compass to determine whether.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I mean, I love that, I'm a big believer in developing your personal compass. And a piece of that is really being really clear on what your personal values are. I think it's also that intersection of life and work, where, I mean, your work, no matter what your work is, whether you own your own business or you're a part of a corporation or you are in a nonprofit or whatever your work is, that intersection of life and work, your life needs to work with your work too, because especially in this day and age where work has almost become 24/7, especially post COVID, where everything is, we're doing work at 10 o'clock at night, but we're going out for a walk with a friend at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, that doesn't always happen, but our life and our work are so integrated that to be really, this word of purpose, being really purposeful and listening to those niggly thoughts that are saying, this isn't the right place for me, or I'm not in the right place right now. And then being really purposeful at aligning, like being thoughtful about, what do I need personally and how can my work support that? And I think that that's a really important piece too.
Yeah, that's a great question. How can my work support this? Sometimes we just compartmentalize things and we miss opportunities there. And I think that's the other piece of it too is um, very often when people are unhappy, we're talking work again, of course, but it's because they're not utilizing their signature strengths, or the
Mhm.
things that we can do that we like to do, right? Or what our character strengths are. There's that via, depending on how you say it, character strengths. I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
it's powerful if you know really what drives you and what lights you up, and you can
What
bring
lights you
that into
up?
work or into a work or a life situation.
Yeah.
the journey is going to be a whole lot better, isn't it?
I call those your superpowers. It's like, how do you know, I have a marketing background. And so I'm always looking to partnering with my clients to think about what are your superpowers and how does that differentiate you from other people? And your superpowers should be aligned with those things that light you up. Just because you're really good at building a presentation doesn't mean that that's what lights you up.
That's
Or
right.
maybe you've been doing this work. Maybe you've been an accountant for the last 20 years, and that's great. But maybe that's not lighting you up anymore. Where do you want to go next? And there's so many skills that we develop through our life that can then be applied to other opportunities. So that's where, you know what, actually, I have a question for you. We talked about this a little bit because we've been talking quite a bit about when do you know it's time for a change.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest barriers are toward making a change? We've been talking about how change can be scary. What are some of the biggest barriers in
Yeah,
your opinion?
that's such a good question. And and I think that's the problem is that there are barriers. People can make these changes. And, there are two things that I know for sure, and people who know me, they've heard this, more than once. So I apologize if anyone's on here. The first is that the biggest impact, I should say, the biggest obstacle to getting what you want and reaching your goals and your full potential is that people sacrifice all of that, what they really want, for short-term comfort. So I think it goes back to, and we've talked a little bit about the whole science of it, neuroscience is, we as humans, we don't like discomfort and we don't like uncertainty. And both of those tend to rear themselves when we consider doing things or thinking differently, or thinking about things differently, especially when those things have something to do with fear of rejection or potential acceptance or not. But it's that whole uncertainty. And so we come up with these great ideas, but then we can quickly talk ourselves out of it. And then we beat ourselves up. We go, oh, I procrastinate, or if only I had more courage or more confidence. I don't have the willpower. I'm not disciplined enough, and all of that. And if
the inner critic that beats you up. Yeah.
Time out. If you told yourself that, stop beating yourself up. That stuff is probably not the reason. So throw that out. It's something physiological. It's just your brain trying to keep you safe by discouraging you from something that might be.
It's fear. Halloween. It's fear of change, and there's actually a psychological, scientific explanation for that. And I mean, I think, and I do think it's like, well, that place of being okay, it's more comfortable. I want to tell you, can I tell you a story about a friend of mine? So this Saturday, a friend of mine was telling, and I told her, she gave me chills. A friend of mine was telling me that she's really cool. She went back to school. She has a career as a librarian. She went back to school to be to get a PhD in media literacy. Super cool. So she went about 2 weeks ago. She went to a conference and she gave a presentation on her dissertation. And she said, I was so scared. That's what she said. She's like, it was really scary. And she said, I said to myself, I'm just going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to do this. And, she could have just gone to the conference and not presented her dissertation, but her professor, her mentor said, you should do this. You can do this. After the presentation, she was approached by a publishing company that said, we want to work with you on putting together a guide for high school teachers about media literacy.
Nice.
And she said to me, she's like, I'm so jazzed. And if she hadn't done that scary thing of getting up and presenting, opportunity would never have never presented itself. So I think, we can go to our comfort zones. Of course, that's where it's comfortable. But the magic happens when we take a little bit of a risk and we get a little uncomfortable. And I would suggest that what she did was not so super uncomfortable, because she had already written the dissertation. She had already presented it to, to her school to get her PhD.
Mhm.
So it was just that next step. And
Yeah,
I said to her, I'm like, oh, you're giving me chills. So she's now working on she's working on her, her proposal to get this published.
that's a great story.
Yeah.
Great success story. And you know what? You said something that she just needed to do her next step, which I love. The other thing I mentioned, what I know for sure what holds people back, but the other thing on the other side of that is that people are so much more powerful than they think they are. Right. But we get stuck in, these limiting beliefs that hold us back, and we miss out on this opportunity. So it's like, again, anybody watching this, get the message. You are more powerful than you think you are. So act accordingly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I completely agree with that. And going back to the step thing, I mean, I find that so many of my clients, when I first start talking to them, they're like, they're feeling paralyzed because they're like here, and they're like, I want to go all the way over there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, how am I going to get all the way over there? So of course you're stopped in your tracks because it seems like such a huge leap. But I'm a big believer in we and I have talked about experimentation and things like that, but let's iterate. Let's take small steps, step by step by step by step. And you learn as you go, and it will change. Things will evolve and they'll refine, and maybe they'll change completely. But you do step by step, and eventually you get closer to your vision, and it brings it so much closer. So I think, and that's a big piece of, as you're thinking about how do you navigate through change, but what holds people back is it just feels too big. And so
Yeah.
how do you make it smaller? How do you just do one little thing every week or every day? Just one little thing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love such great advice. Yeah. Chunk it down a little bit. What's the next best step? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not as comfortable doing it that way, I suspect, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, I think, and I also think, I was talking about, mentioned experimentation, this whole idea of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And a growth mindset learns from things that don't work the way you expect it to, and that you're willing to make mistakes, or you're okay with mistakes. And then how do you incorporate those things that maybe don't turn out the way you thought they would? And how do you incorporate that into your learning? And that's that growth mindset versus, and this idea of failure immunity. This is all Carol Dweck's book, I can share more of the information. It's called Mindset, and her last name is Dweck. But she talks about having failure immunity. Failure shouldn't feel like it cuts us off at the knees. Failure should just be like, all right, well, that was interesting, and what do I do with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I think that's just part of the process and actually, even the word failure, we can remove that.
failure immunity. You don't even like the word failure.
I don't even like the word failure. I don't think there is such a thing. I think that everything is about taking aim, taking your best shot, and then making some alterations. Take your best shot and make some alterations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had talked about a little bit, it's interesting, going back to the science, you had told me a little bit earlier about this idea of peak performance science.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that and how to tap into that when you're beginning to navigate through change, or when you want to navigate through change.
Yeah. Okay. So people say, what does peak performance even look like? What does that mean, really? And part of that is coming to the presence, but it's also about sort of hacking your brain a little bit so that you're turning on the parts of your brain that are going to help you navigate going to help you see solutions, open up your vision. I'm talking about executive functions, and those reside in a certain area toward the front of your brain. It's called your prefrontal cortex. When we're scared or stressed, or we tell ourselves these negative things, those abilities get constricted. Your prefrontal cortex gets a little bit, it's not working to its full capacity. On the other hand, we can change that. So we have another part of our brain, sort of toward the back of our brain. It's part of what's called our limbic system. Some people call it your survival brain or your fight or flight brain and so forth. That gets turned on with fear. That's the part of your brain that's constantly looking for the negative, because it's looking for danger. It wants to keep you safe. So when we want to be in peak performance, if we want to show up in our life in peak performance, whether that's navigating change or anything else, we want to keep this part quiet and this part open. How do we do that? Well, meditation or mindfulness can help, because we want to quiet down noise. There's a lot of noise in our lives, and
a lot of noise, definitely. Yep.
Right. There's a lot out there that tells us we should be scared and nervous and so forth. External forces that have nothing to do with the change or the transformation that we're looking for. So
fear of judgment.
Those.
I feel like fear of judgment is such an external force too.
Yeah.
Think about me. Yeah.
I agree with you. So quiet down that judge. Start looking for that judge and recognize it for what it is and quiet it down, because it's going to limit what you see possible for yourself. So that's a quick little Reader's Digest. If we had more time, we would.
No, it's so interesting though, because you and I are landing in a lot of the same places, but we come at it a different way.
Yeah.
So from different perspectives, because I think about, you talked about that tunnel, like when you can't see the opportunities. Mm-hmm. And I look at that as kind of these energy levels, and there's negative or catabolic energy levels, and there's positive anabolic energy levels. And at the very bottom are more catabolic energy levels, which are the things that, like, I'm at the mercy of everything. I'm a victim to what's going on around me. I have no control, and or there's those, or that, so I can't influence what's going on around me. Or there's that anger, like nothing's going the way I want it to be. I can't influence this. All this makes me so angry. And those catabolic, those negative, that when you're in that negative energy space, you talked about that energy, you're like this. You can't see the opportunities around you because it's a tunnel. It's like all that noise and all that negative, your internal chatter, the fear of the external world and what they're going to think about you and all of that, it keeps you here. But when you get to the higher levels of energy, that's where you start getting really creative in how you can approach things, and you start connecting with other people and connecting ideas, and this is where you can start doing experimentation and see all the possibilities. Yeah. So it's really interesting, Barbara, to talk to you, because you're coming at it more from like the physiological and like the way your brain thinks.
Yeah. We approach it in somewhat of the same way. Maybe we use some similar language, some different language. Saboteur thinking will get you every time. And the good news is what, these smart people in the fields of neuroscience and psychology and performance science have really boiled things down to 9 potential patterns of thinking, plus that internal judge, that are at the root of all negative emotion. So one of the things that I have on my website that's very popular is just a little white paper so people can recognize those things themselves. But you mentioned some of them, controlling or feeling like a victim, feeling like you have to control things, people pleasing, that'll cause a lot of discomfort, feeling like you constantly have to achieve, that'll cause discomfort, not being in the present. So being one of those restless FOMO people, that'll create a lot of discomfort. And all of those things, as you said, from a physiological perspective, they're going to constrain what's possible for you.
Okay, so we've talked a ton about, why change is scary and why it might be holding you back. what are some ideas that you have to get started? I mean, when we've talked a little bit about tips, but how do you get started to map your next move, or to decide how, to start moving toward change without it being super scary?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. So first thing is to recognize that the discomfort or uncertainty, they're just vibrations. And we can weather those. You mentioned also chunking things down to small pieces. The thing that I work on with a lot of my clients, which is very impactful, is small changes done consistently. Because what
Mm-hmm.
that does is that takes the uncomfortable and makes it comfortable, right? Um, but if you want better outcomes and you want the journey to be great, we talk as coaches about, we help people make goals, and it's very common language. We're getting to the end of the year, so people are going to put their goals together for next year and so forth, which is great. We reach your goals and then we make new goals. Most of the time we're in that journey. So what
Mm-hmm.
makes it better, and uh, what I've learned is you have to go back to the way that you think, because the way that you think, the thoughts, conscious or unconscious, so we got to dig down. It's noisy, so we got to dig down. Those thoughts are going to drive how we feel. How we feel is going to drive whether we take action or not, and what action we take. And those
Yeah.
actions are going to determine our outcomes. So our outcomes come from what we do or don't do. That's driven by how we feel. And how we feel is driven by our thoughts. So you want to go way back there. That's why journaling can be really helpful, because it can help you dig down. Working with a licensed therapist or a certified coach can help you do that, or just something, meditation can help you dig down. You want to get down to how you think about the change that you want to make, or how you think about your life, or how you think about your work situation or your relationship. Dig down to really get to the root of what is the message that you're giving yourself, because that is the most powerful ammunition that you have to not only get through the change and navigate that transformation, but to do it with ease and flow and joy in the process.
Yeah.
Right? It
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think that's really true, and I think that's some of that compass work, that inner compass work. I love all that. The other thing that I think about is, find, say it out loud. Like, start, like, if there's a vision that you have. I ran a vision board workshop back in September, and there is scientific proof that when you put your vision, when you mentioned journaling, you could do it in journaling, or you could do a vision board, which is a whole other conversation we can have. But when you say it out loud and you put it out there, it helps you to focus on it and, like, write it down or put it up on a picture. And then find collaboration partners. Say it out loud to a friend. Have your, this idea of having your own personal advisory board. It doesn't have to be formal, but in your own mind, who are your mentors, or who are the people who can help support you and keep you accountable, maybe, to some of your goals. It could be, of course, it could be coaching, or, but having those people around, surrounding you with people, and actually stating, you know what, I want to start, I want to do XYZ. And when you say it out loud, that also gets you, it opens up that door a little bit. We're talking about, like, oh, what's that scary change behind the door? But it opens up the door, and it gives you that opportunity to start stepping through and actually moving forward. So I am a big believer in, partnering with other people, even, and there's so many different ways you can do that. But and that helps you with accountability too, because when you say to your friend, I'm really ready to start making a move toward XYZ, your friend is probably going to say to you, hey, what's going on with that? And it helps with that accountability. It's not just the internal motivation, it's the external motivation also.
Yeah. I love it. What great advice. It almost sounded like create kind of an affirmation story for yourself, especially if you're a visual person, and saying it out loud. And what comes to mind when you mention, okay, so, share it with people around you, is that one of the things that I've learned as a coach, and I'm sure you have as well, is that sometimes people just need to unpack their thoughts.
Hmm.
Again, it's this confusing world. We have tens of thousands of thoughts in a day. So I love that because I think that it helps people get some clarity. So speak to a friend, even if you're not 100% sure about what it is you want or the change that can come, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think it goes all the way to what we were talking about at the very beginning of this is pay attention to those niggly thoughts inside your head. You should be listening to yourself. There's so many opportunities that can open themselves up through change. And I think it's like, listen to those thoughts and don't feel like you have to settle because of that inner critic that you're not enough or that you don't have the skill sets or you don't have this or you don't have that. And all right, we could talk about, so many other things. I mean, there's there's this idea of like anchor problems or anchor things that really stand in your way, like not, if I always use this as a silly analogy, but if you want to be a surfer and you live in Chicago, you're probably not going to be able to become a surfer. You're not living in the right place. That's an anchor problem. But there's so many other challenges that can be addressed through mindset changes or just kind of shifting the way you look at something. And those things are not necessarily, are they really true? Like true with a capital T, like gravity is true, but there's also a lot of truths that we have that aren't necessarily true that hold us back.
Yeah.
Oh, we could talk about that. And well, maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why questioning those thoughts really, because they play
Yeah,
with
listening and questioning. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Um, so let's say someone they go, okay, well, I'm going to make a change, right? And they even create sort of a path for themselves to get from point A to point B, right? We make these great plans, but then life takes over. Sometimes we hit a dead end, or I'm using like road analogies, a fork in the road or something like that. And that can kind of mess with us a little bit. Any thoughts or advice for people, during that journey?
So when they come up with barriers or
Yeah, or their motivation is waning potentially, is what I'm kind of thinking.
yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to like taking those small steps. All right, now I'm going to be bothered by my cat who just let himself in the cat door.
Hello?
Bagel, you're live. Um, so yes, I mean, I think that a big piece of it is to experiment. I'm going back to that experimentation, and it can be as much as, and I don't mean experimentation does not need to be complicated. Experimentation can be, let me pick up the phone or find, and find someone who's doing something that I'm interested in. Let
Mhm.
me call them. What does that look like? And like, and have what I call, curiosity conversation. What do how did you start doing what you're doing? What inspired you? What is it that you love about doing every day? So that's as simple as it could be, is that just do a curiosity conversation and, it is, and with somebody who might be doing what you're doing, and that may open up some really great new ideas for you. Experimentation can be as simple as, trying just one new project. I don't know. And actually, I'm a big believer. I don't know if we've talked about this. I do walking workshops. Get outside.
Yeah.
Get outside and see what inspires you, how that can inspire you. Like go for a walk and have that particular, don't listen to music, don't listen to a podcast. Have that particular your particular question in your head and be inspired by the world around you and just focus on it a little bit.
Yeah, love that.
What about you? What are your ideas?
Well, yeah, I mean, I love the whole idea of experimenting, and when the motivation is down, I think that can really be helpful because you can find more creative avenues to approach the same potential outcome or goal. And I think that you can get rooted when you're feeling ungrounded at those times. And two things I find are really helpful with that. One is knowing your values and what's most important, because I think that we can get sidetracked being concerned or wasting time in the things that aren't as important. So, we do a lot of visualizations in positive intelligence, and one of them is tapping into our elder, wiser self. So, if you think of, okay, this is my current situation, but if you can pull yourself out of that and put yourself in years down the road when you're your elder, wiser self and you're looking back at this time, it can really help you just get rooted in what's most important to you. And the other thing is knowing your values. If I ask someone, tell me about your values, and they go, I don't really know. That's a great, okay, it's time to start thinking about that. It's really, really important because that will help. Again, you mentioned the compass. I think those are like, the north, east, west, south.
North Star, they call it, right? The
North Star, right, on your compass. They'll help you tap into that, and so, and purpose also, of course. But but just getting rooted in what's most important for you, I believe, will help level up your motivation. And upon some reflection and creativity, you'll know what the next step should be for sure. So,
yeah.
yeah. So I see that there's a comment, Sarah put, but there's so many unknowns to all of this too. Yes, you're absolutely right. And we want to get grounded in what we do know, right? There are a lot of unknowns. It could go in 1,000 different directions, and that can kind of mess with our well-being and our outcome. So let's get rooted in what we do know. What is it that you know for sure about yourself and your situation? I think that's a really good and powerful place to start.
Yeah, and I do think that actually the experimentation starts to define some of the knowns, especially safe, let's call it safe experimentation. It helps to define it starts putting some more, we talked about skeleton earlier, it starts to put more meat on the bones, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. It starts to, you talked about at the beginning about how there's that fear of change because it's unknown.
Mm-hmm.
You could, though, that experimentation can help you to fill in the blanks and make things more known.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You don't know unless you try it. And the other thing, you were saying something, and it reminded me to mention something that I think is really important for people to know. Because we tend to compare ourselves to other and be like, oh, that person I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the talent, I don't have the experience, and everybody else is here and I'm here and I don't know if I can do that. I don't have the confidence and all of that. And the truth is that the most impactful thing to your success, however you define success, because there's lots of different ways of looking at it,
100%.
the most impactful thing is not your education or your experience or any inherent talents or skills that you have. The biggest impact on what is going to drive you forward toward your success is your belief in yourself. So that's a great, great place to start. Invest your time in that and really get rooted in that.
Yeah, I see that in my clients. I mean, I see that having that confidence is so important. And actually, that's a lot of the work. I mean, I don't, and I mentioned that, you're trying to get clarity, the confidence and the courage to make the change, that confidence. And sometimes it's just reframing what your skill sets are, or reframing, who you are as those capabilities that you have, and that can give the confidence to really be able to make those, to make those changes.
Yeah.
So
the confidence comes in actually doing the action. It doesn't happen before. We think, oh, well, I do and I have enough confidence. You have to do it. And that's where that's where you get like really proud of yourself for doing something that felt a little bit scary.
You know what? It comes back to my friend who, did that presentation, and she was terrified. And next time she does it, she's going to be a lot more confident, because she knows that she got, she had positive reinforcement. Somebody came at, someone asked her from that to write a book proposal. So clearly, just she tapped into that what she did know, which is that I'm an expert at this topic, and she tapped into that and used that to cover the gaps, close that gap behind, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about public speaking, but I'm really confident about my knowledge, that foundation. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah. Again, we're more powerful than we think we are. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that. Sometimes we need to just sit down and make a list of all the things that we have dealt with and overcome and learned from in our lives, because it can really help level up your courage and your motivation to move forward and try things, like you said, the experimentation.
So I think we've had some really good ideas. I mean, so I think, we're 12:40. I told people it'd be about 30 minutes. And I'd love to, if anybody has, who is listening to this live or listens to it later, if we keep, Barbara and I have been talking about continuing these conversations. If there's any topics specifically around change and navigating through change that maybe we touched on, I think that people should reach out to us, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I actually had a number of people send me some DMs, particularly on Instagram, that they could not attend today, but they wanted us to do like some Instagram lives in the nighttime after work. And
Great.
so forth.
That would be fun.
So yeah, so if you're watching this in real time or on the replays, follow Lori or follow me or follow both of us. We show up on LinkedIn, we show up on Instagram. Lori, are you other places, in the social?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I mean, you see my email address there. Message me on LinkedIn, and I offer, and I think Barbara does too, free discovery introductory calls. I'm always happy to talk about this topic. So yeah, I'd love to hear from folks.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if your email's there, but your website is there, lhscoaching.com, and mine is Big Dream Executive Coaching. So go there, you can connect with us. Or as Lori mentioned, you can schedule a complimentary coaching session. Sometimes it's really all what people need. And we've got some great content there as well. And
in our websites. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I guess my thought is, as we're wrapping this up, is that, yeah, change is scary. But it also, I think, what did you say in the headline? I mean, there's just, it can also open up so many opportunities, and, just exploring what that looks like and start taking some first steps. And that's where, I mean, we've talked about lots of different ways to do that, but that's also where even, coaching can get you started too. So, or even an introductory call.
Yeah. That sounds great. That sounds like a great place to stop. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you're here, you've watched to the end, and we really appreciate you. And
really appreciate you.
Value. So have a wonderful day, all.
Thanks. And Barbara, thanks for inviting me. This has been fun.
Yeah. Lord, I'm so glad to talk with you. Appreciate it. Take care.